Hi, I'm Caroline Mitchell, Canine Behaviourist at Gooddoggie. And I want to talk today just a little bit, just touch on resource guarding in our dogs. So resource guarding happens when a dog feels that their resources might be limited or threatened for whatever reason. So this could happen because of anxiety, or maybe they are full of adrenaline, or adrenaline is at the wrong time, or maybe they have a past experience which makes them think that they should be concerned about resources that are available to them. Typically, dogs will guard food, toys, or their bed maybe, but they can become possessive about pretty much anything, including trash they found on the ground, people, an area of the house, feathers, or even a particular room. Or in one case I saw recently, the dog had become quite possessive over a little patch on the carpet. So resource guarding is a tricky problem to solve, but there are 5 definite things that you should stop doing if you have a dog that is resource guarding, and 2 things that you definitely should. And I'm going to talk a bit about all of those today in this video. So one thing that you should not do if you have a dog that resource guards is free feed. Free feeding happens when basically you just fill up the dog's bowl, and when it gets empty, you refill it. And they just kind of have access to the food all the time. It is much better if you have a dog that resource guards, whether it's food or not, to feed at set times of the day. This makes food much more predictable. When a dog knows when the food will come and when it won't come, this reduces anxiety. Anxiety will contribute to problems like resource guarding, and when it's connected to a resource as well, then this has a double impact. When we feel anxious about something like food, we tend to start to want to hoard and become a little bit obsessed over these things. And this is the emotional response that we don't want. When this emotional response starts to trigger, then our dog will try to gain control over things that they can't change. And this creates a food guarding issue. So imagine yourself, if you don't know if you're going to get fed at tea time, or at 8 o'clock, or at 3 o'clock, then you might feel a bit more protective over the food that you do have, because at this point you don't really know how long that's going to have to last you. This is the kind of emotional response we're trying to avoid in our dogs. So if you have a dog that resource guards, feed at set times of the day. Whether it's resource guarding food or not, this is one area of their life where we can create some predictability around a resource, even if it's not the one that they're guarding. Something else we shouldn't be doing if we have a dog that resource guards is leaving down uneaten food. If you have a dog particularly that guards food, it might sound counterproductive to take away leftover food because we don't want our dog to feel hungry, so therefore we leave the food down longer. But actually part of the problem is that when a dog grazes, they get out of sync with their meal times. So when you put the food down at times that they're not hungry, then they don't eat it, and then they're expecting it to be there later on. So this kind of out of sync can cause anxiety again, just like free feeding does. So once you've decided on set times to feed your dog, 2 times a day is probably best for most adult dogs, but you know your dog better than anybody. There's no reason why you have to limit it to 2. You could feed 3 times a day if you prefer. But once you've decided, then you're going to set those times, and you're going to put the food down, whatever portion they should be getting, depending on how many meals you've decided on. And once they've wandered away, just leave 5 minutes to check that they're not going to come back. And after that period of time, then you're just going to lift the bowl up. This will stop them grazing now between breakfast and lunchtime. So when the lunchtime food goes down, or whatever the next meal is in your schedule, they will be hungrier. Now, if they didn't eat their full meal as soon as you put it down the first time, so let's say you started at breakfast, if they didn't finish their breakfast or they barely touched it, then that's a really good sign that they weren't actually that hungry at that time. So we don't have to feel too guilty about lifting that up. If they've wandered off, they weren't that into it. So by the time their next meal comes round, they haven't grazed in between. So hopefully they're feeling a bit hungrier. So actually we can now give them their next meal, and they should really be a bit more interested in tucking into it. And as this cycle kind of goes round and round and round, they're more and more likely to finish their meal. And then they'll end up in actual proper meal times, and they'll get back into sync. So they'll start to feel hungry just before dinner time, just like we do. We don't start to feel hungry at random times of the day unless we graze. When we get into a routine of eating at set times, we tend to start getting hungrier just before those meal times, just as they start to approach. And that's the right way to do it, because you start to feel hungry, then you satisfy that hunger, just a short amount of time later. When we get out of sync, then we get hungry at random times, blood sugars are going all over the place, and this is not good for a dog that resource guards. So, feeding at set times, do not leave food down. Something else that we need to stop doing if we have a dog that resource guards is we need to stop using slow feeders. We need to stop using snuffle mats, enrichment feeders, anything basically that makes eating a challenge. And I know that that is the point of these devices. We give them to our dogs because we feel like they eat too fast. And we want to slow that down. And there are other ways to slow a dog down that eats too fast. And there are other ways to provide enrichment to our dogs rather than using these things. I absolutely have no problem at all with using these things if you want to just have them as a little game to play in the afternoon, have a little snack, and something to do. But don't feed your meals using slow feeders, snuffle mats, or any kind of enrichment feeder. These provide a challenge to your dog. We've just mentioned that, and that is really the point of them, except that when we give our dog a challenge, it produces adrenaline. It triggers a fight or flight mode in your dog, and we don't want them to be eating their meals while they're in fight or flight mode. This makes them much more reactive. It might even put them off eating. So if you have a dog that doesn't eat at set times, this could be part of the reason why. Because once that adrenaline has started to go around in their body, they're not in eating mode anymore. They're in hunting mode. We don't want our dogs to be in hunting mode when they eat. We want them to be in the rest and digest stage, which comes after that. We don't hunt the food after we've caught the food. That's silly. And our hormones will regulate all of this so that we're doing everything in the right order. So as we start to feel hungry, we will go into that kind of challenge mode. We want to have the challenge. We want to catch the food. They'll want to hunt their dinner. Once they've got it though, they have to go into a rest and digest stage. That switches off all of that reactive behavior. It stops all of that adrenaline from circling around, and it allows our dogs to settle down, eat the food and digest it properly and rest. They need to rest after they've caught their food, but this doesn't allow them to do that. So whenever you're eating the food, if you imagine you're still in this kind of pumped up, adrenaline fueled mode, and people are coming near you while you're trying to eat, of course you're going to be more reactive to that, and you're more likely to be resource guarding your food whenever you're in that state. So take away all of the challenge. The food needs to be easy to get. It needs to be free, and we need to let them have their full meal while they're in this rest state. And then they'll be able to switch off, and everything else will just switch off, and they'll have a nice rest afterwards and digest it properly. All these kinds of digestive problems will also add to that kind of resource guarding, limited resource, concerned about resource kind of emotional state. So we want all of that gone. We want our dogs to be very relaxed about the whole idea of feeding. We also need to stop drip feeding our dogs. Lots of people choose to hand out their dogs' meals to them throughout the day as rewards. They'll basically fill up a pouch in the morning with all of their dog's food, and as the day goes on, they'll just be handing it out. This means that that food is delivered to your dog in dribs and drabs. Dogs aren't designed to graze. They're not rabbits or horses. They feast and then famine. They go out, they catch the food when they get hungry, they eat it, and then they rest. They don't just keep on grazing and eating and hunting all day long in this kind of constant cycle. We've already talked about the effects of having adrenaline going around. When we don't get into that rest state, we need them to go into that rest state in order that they can settle and be relaxed. We don't want them to be in hunting mode all the time, because that makes them protective of all of their stuff. That's what that mode is meant to be. So we need them to have a full belly. So when we get them into a routine of eating at set times and eating full meals at each time, they get a really nice full belly feeling. We all love that feeling. We remember that, especially on Christmas Day or after Sunday roast if you have one. You've eaten just a bit too much and you want to just sit and you just want to relax all afternoon and you just enjoy that kind of state. That's a really important state to be in. If you never receive a full belly from your meals, then that rest and digest state never gets switched on. The body never gets a signal to say, I've eaten enough food. Just constant dribbles of food all day long won't turn that off in the same way as getting a full belly of food does. So they are going to seek to protect what they have because they never feel like they've had enough of it. So this doesn't help if you have a dog that resource guard. So another thing, stop doing that. Full meals at set times, no grazing. And the fifth thing we need to stop doing if we have a dog that guards their resources is we need to stop testing our training progress. People always say to me, should I be able to put my hand in my dog's food? Should I be able to go near my dog when they're eating? Should I be able to do all these things? I mean, the answer probably is yes, but every time we test it, we remind our dogs that their resource that they're trying to protect is important and that it is under threat. Every time we try to check to see if our dog is going to bite us if we go near their food, we remind them that they used to bite us when we went near the food. We remind them that they're supposed to be guarding this food. So we need to stop doing that. We need to let them feel like these resources are not important. They're not limited. There's all the food in the world and we're not worried about their food. They get their food, we have our food, and it's all fine. We need to stop trying to check whether our training is working and just trust that it is. Because we're just reinforcing that problem and reinforcing that fear and making him more possessive and more likely he wants to control his stuff. So stop testing your progress. And I said there's two things really that we should be doing if we have a dog that does resource guarding. And the first one is to get your dog checked by a vet. So many things can affect the way a dog behaves, and quite a lot of them are illness and pain. We can't always see that pain for ourselves just because our dog seems to be walking around normally, they're eating and drinking. We can't use those as proof that their dog is not suffering with any kind of illness or pain. So when you go to your vet, tell them that you have a dog that resource guards and tell them that you want them to be checked to make sure there's no underlying condition that could be causing that. Could be anything. Your dog could have a digestive problem, which means they're not absorbing enough nutrients, which is why that they are especially stuck on their food, really protective of their food, because actually they're never really feeling like they've had a proper dinner. They could be something like diabetes, blood sugar spiking all over the place can change their dog's mood. You wouldn't see that just to look at your dog. Maybe there's some pain somewhere. Remember that dogs are designed to hide pain from people. So just manipulating your dog's legs and watching them moving around will not give you the information you need. It's not proof that there isn't a problem. When you see a problem, there's proof that it is, but not seeing it is not proof that it isn't there. So no matter how sure you are that there is no underlying conditions, please take your dog to the vet and get them to confirm that for you before you do anything else, because it could just be such a simple fix. And finally, the last thing we need to do if you have a resource dog is check that not only are you giving them the right amount of food, but also check that they're getting the right balance nutritionally over the day. It's very easy to add snacks and treats and everything else in, which can really unbalance your food. Maybe you've given them the perfect dry dog food, which is the perfect balance of everything. But if you give your dog toast and biscuits and everything else throughout the day, then that balance gets knocked out. So have a look at everything that goes in their mouth all day long and check to make sure that that is not skewing your balance. If you cook for your dog, then check to make sure that you're still getting that balance right. A lot of vets have nutritionists now that you can speak to, and they'll be able to give you some advice about how to balance the fats and the fiber and everything else that goes into your dog's food to make sure it's the perfect balance. If we unbalance the food, this can upset their tummy and their gut, and that can make them grumpy and moody, and it can make them emotional around resources. So it's definitely check that. Again, to check that they're getting the right amount of food. I know this kind of seems obvious, but it's so easy over time for this stuff to change, you know, as your dog changes weight and age. And as we get a bit sort of lax about how we feed our dogs, you know, we get used to a cup full, cup and a half. What does that mean? Over time, that might grow. The treats they're getting the rest of the day might change. Maybe if they've been grazing and free feeding, they haven't been getting enough food. So it's another really good reason why we should get them feeding at set times and set amounts, because it allows us to monitor exactly what food they get. So if they're not getting enough food over the day because they've been grazing and we haven't noticed, then that can also trigger that kind of that need to guard and protect our resources because they're not getting enough, and then that has that knock-on effect as well. So check the food is balanced. Possibly think about introducing a probiotic as well, because that means that everything they're getting is going to be digested to the absolute best it can be and absorbed as well as it can be. But these are things you could speak to your vet about when you go in there for your vet check to make sure there's no illnesses or health conditions or pain or anything like that that could be affecting them, and make sure they're getting the right amount of food every single day. So these are things that you should and shouldn't be doing if you have a dog that resource guards. Also, really, I guess you should be getting some help from somebody professional. These are great tips to help make sure that you're not making it worse. And if you have a dog that might be on the fence about resource guarding, perhaps they're starting to show signs of resource guarding, this could be enough just to get them back to where they were, just to take the pressure off and take that anxiety away, stop that adrenaline getting triggered. So these are the things that you're trying to avoid. So hopefully those tips have helped. If you need more help, then check out your local behaviourist or get in touch with me, because I can help you online or offline, depending on where you are in the country or the world even. And I'll see you on the next video. Take care for now. Bye-bye.